Silas Merrick stood frozen, chalk in hand, while the room stared like he'd pulled a weapon, not solved a math equation. The teacher's voice cut the silence. "There's no way you did that on your own." Gasps. One kid laughed. Another whispered, "He cheated." But Silas? He had only answered the question they said was above his level. And in 30 seconds, he went from invisible genius to school threat. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The late afternoon sun spilled through the high windows of Meadow Ridge Middle School, its light settling like dust on forgotten textbooks and half-wiped whiteboards. The building had begun to quiet, the clamor of school hours giving way to the hush of after-school programs and janitorial routines. Room 3C, tucked at the end of the second floor, buzzed with a different kind of energy. Tight, focused, self-congratulatory. This was math club, and it wasn't for just anyone. Inside, the atmosphere was saturated with quiet confidence. A dozen students were already settled, their chairs pulled close to their desks, notebooks open, calculators blinking with activity. Most of them were boys, all of them white, except one brown-haired girl, who kept to herself, eyes fixed on a statistics packet. Laughter occasionally rippled between rows when someone solved a particularly tough problem before the timer beeped. There was a hierarchy here, though unspoken. You were either one of them, or you weren't. Silas Merrick stepped into the scene like a sudden draft of cold air. No one had heard him approach. He paused just outside the doorway, adjusting the weight of his backpack on one shoulder. His clothes were clean but unbranded. His sneakers, while worn, were neatly tied. He had the kind of presence that didn't ask for attention but couldn't help attracting it. Not because he demanded space, but because his very arrival disrupted what everyone thought they knew about who belonged. Mr. Blake Rowan, mid-40s with stiff khakis, and a perpetual smirk that curled more on the right than the left, looked up from his clipboard. He blinked once, slowly, as though his eyes were adjusting to something unexpected. "You lost, son?" Rowan asked casually, as if the question were harmless. Silas met his gaze. "I'm here for math club." A few students snickered under their breath. One boy elbowed another. Someone muttered, "New guy," loud enough to be heard. Rowan didn't laugh, but he didn't smile either. "This club's for advanced placement math. You sure you're in the right place?" "I was told it's open," Silas replied, his voice even. "Mr. Lawrence from homeroom said I could come." The girl with the statistics packet looked up for the first time. Rowan gave a short nod, almost reluctant. "All right, grab a seat." Silas moved toward the back, picking a desk near the window. The scraping of the chair legs against the floor sounded louder than it needed to be. He pulled out a notebook with frayed edges and a mechanical pencil already halfway through its life. As he sat, his face remained impassive, but his fingers tapped twice on the desk. A nervous tick. The silence around him felt heavier than the air outside. Rowan resumed the session as if Silas weren't there. "We're continuing with nonlinear equations today," he said, turning to the board and writing in tight, slanted handwriting. "Let's see who remembers how to handle this." The question wasn't difficult. Not for this group. Several students raised their hands, and Rowan called on one, then another. Silas kept his hand down. He watched. He listened, not just to the math but to how the room operated. Who answered first? Who joked the loudest? Who whispered smugly when someone stumbled? 20 minutes passed. Silas didn't speak, but his pencil moved. Not in random doodles or notes, but in precise calculations and corrections to the board's missteps. The boy beside him tried to peek, but quickly looked away when Silas caught him. Then, something shifted. Rowan walked over to the board, erasing the prior question with sharp, aggressive strokes. He wrote a new equation, one involving variables that nested within functions, a problem typically reserved for high school juniors. It sprawled across the board, twisting in complexity. He turned, marker still in hand, and said, "Let's try something more advanced." Silas looked up. Rowan's eyes met his. "This one's above you," he said with a smirk that didn't try to hide what it meant. The room didn't laugh, but it didn't protest either. Even the girl with the statistics packet looked down again. Silas didn't flinch. He didn't ask for the problem to be repeated. He simply stood. The chair scraped back again. Louder this time. He walked to the board, his steps even, and picked up the second marker Rowan had set down. The teacher hesitated, eyes narrowing slightly. In one sweeping motion, Silas began writing. His handwriting was angular but fluid, the kind of penmanship born from writing fast, and off. He rewrote the equation, restructured it, isolated terms with precision, and within 30 seconds, before the classroom had even settled from the shock of his approach, he circled the final answer. It was correct, impeccably laid out. He turned, marker still in hand, and looked directly at Mr. Rowan. His face held no glee, no arrogance, just quiet certainty. The room was silent. Rowan stepped forward slowly, glancing at the board as though willing the solution to be flawed. He stared at it, then at Silas, then back again. For a moment, a flicker of doubt, or discomfort, crossed his face. But then it hardened. Impressive, he said flatly. Maybe you've seen that one before? No, Silas said. He handed back the marker. I just know how to solve it. There it was, a subtle shift. No cheers, no claps. But the temperature in the room changed. One boy lowered his pencil, another adjusted his posture. They weren't celebrating him, but now they couldn't ignore him. Silas returned to his seat. His pencil tapped once, then twice, then stopped. Mr. Rowan turned back to the board, erasing the solution more aggressively than before. Let's move on. But even as he began the next explanation, he couldn't shake what had just happened, and neither could the room. Silas sat quietly, but behind his eyes, something had been triggered. Not pride, not victory, just a quiet certainty that, once again, he would have to prove what others were simply allowed to be. And as the bell rang an hour later, and the students gathered their bags and bantered about video games and weekend plans, Mr. Rowan stayed behind at his desk. He opened his laptop, his expression unreadable. He began typing. Subject, Rye, Silas Merrick. Math club. Body, need to verify the student's academic standing. May have accessed material beyond current grade level. Please advise. Mr. Rowan assigns a complex calculus question and turns towards Silas with a condescending smirk. This one's above you. The marker squeaked as Silas underlined the final digit of his solution. His arm dropped to his side, calm and deliberate, like a pianist finishing the last note of a concert he never got to announce. For 3 full seconds the room said nothing. Then came the first gasp. A student in the front row, mouth slightly agape, leaned forward to make sure he was reading it right. The others followed, tilting in their chairs, brows furrowed. Murmurs swept across the room, a low hum of disbelief, like a current sparking through metal. Wait, that's actually right, whispered Mason, the self-proclaimed ace of the group, to the boy next to him.
Is it? The boy asked, craning his neck. No way he got it that fast.
Silas said nothing. He returned the marker to the whiteboard tray and walked back to his seat without breaking eye contact with anyone. Not in defiance, not with arrogance, just certainty. His pace was even, his face unreadable, like he had simply done what needed to be done, and that was all. Mr. Rowan's fingers twitched at his side. His face was locked in an expression that tried to pass for neutral, but the corners of his mouth were tight, too tight. He turned back to the board slowly, like it might change while he wasn't looking. The problem was a beast, a multivariable calculus question that even for the brightest students in the room would have taken 5 minutes minimum to solve. And not just solve but explain clearly, step by step, with accuracy. But Silas had done it in under 30 seconds. And worse, he had done it beautifully. Rowan blinked hard, then forced a smile. Well, he said, clearing his throat, that's efficient. No one laughed. A beat passed before he added, have you seen that question before, Silas? The room stilled again. The tone in Rowan's voice was unmistakable now. It wasn't curiosity. It was suspicion wrapped in politeness. Silas raised an eyebrow slightly, his voice level. No. You sure? I don't memorize answers, Silas replied, sharper this time. I solve problems. Rowan chuckled softly, but there was no humor in it. Just asking. It's a complex question. Advanced. Not if you understand the structure, Silas said. Then just for a second, he looked around the room and added, it's just pattern recognition. A few students exchanged glances, some impressed, others uncomfortable. Mason scowled down at his notes like they'd betrayed him. Mr. Rowan turned back to the board and erased Silas's solution, not piece by piece, but in one sweeping motion that wiped away the entire answer. We'll continue, he said, voice clipped. Let's focus on today's actual lesson plan. Silas stared at the now blank board. It wasn't just an erasure of numbers, it was an attempt to erase him. But he'd already left his mark. After the club session ended, students filed out of room 3C in clumps, some still whispering about the answer, others pretending it hadn't happened. Silas packed slowly. He didn't want to walk with them, or behind them. He wanted space. As he zipped up his backpack, he heard Rowan close his laptop with a soft click. The teacher stayed seated at his desk, chin propped on one hand, pretending to go over notes, but his eyes tracked Silas the whole time. "Good work today," Rowan said, with a tone so bland it meant nothing. Silas nodded once, then left. The door swung closed behind him. Rowan opened his laptop again. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, hesitant, then began typing fast. To Principal Margaret Denning. Subject academic concern. Silas Merrick. Body, I'd like to request a review of student Silas Merrick's academic record. His performance in today's math club meeting raises questions about possible external preparation or unacknowledged access to advanced materials. Please advise on next steps. B. Rowan. He read it twice, then hit send. Down the hallway, Silas walked with a measured step, each footfall soft against the tile. His mind wasn't racing, it was cataloging. Every silence, every look, every hesitation. He had seen it before, just not quite this loud. Outside the air was cool. The sky had darkened to that in-between blue, neither day nor night. Silas found a bench near the front of the school and sat pulling his notebook from his backpack. Not to review notes, just to breathe. Writing helped him think, helped him process. He flipped past pages of equations, graphs, problem sets, all his own. No one had ever helped him. His mother worked late shifts and barely had time to sleep, let alone tutor. His teachers had never pushed him. He'd taught himself through library books, online lectures, free PDFs. And now, the moment he finally stood in front of them and showed what he could do, they questioned it. Not with open insults, but with suspicion. Silas looked up at the darkening sky. He knew the story. He'd read it 1,000 times in different faces. And yet he hadn't expected it to feel like this. Not so soon. Back in room 3C, Rowan sat at his desk long after the sun disappeared. He had told himself he was being cautious, responsible, making sure no one was cheating or gaming the system. But deep down something unsettled him. Because Silas hadn't been arrogant. He hadn't flaunted. He hadn't even smiled. And that, more than anything, had unnerved him. The next day, Rowan stopped by the main office early. He spoke casually to the front desk secretary, asking for Silas's cumulative file. She hesitated. Files weren't supposed to be released without reason. "Just need to verify a few things," Rowan said, trying to sound teacherly. "He's new to math club, want to ensure proper placement." The secretary nodded reluctantly and retrieved the file. Rowan flipped through it with deliberate speed. Grades straight A's. Standardized test scores in the 97th percentile. Attendance flawless. But something caught his eye. No recommendations for gifted programs. No teacher notes about advanced ability. No gifted label anywhere. That gave him pause, because now the system was either failing or Silas had found a way to hide in plain sight. He returned the file, forced a smile, and walked out of the office. In the hallway, he passed a group of teachers whispering near the bulletin board.
That's the kid from math club, right?
Yeah. Apparently showed everyone up yesterday. He quiet? Too quiet. Rowan didn't stop walking, but the corners of his mouth curled again, this time in satisfaction. Whispers were spreading. Not admiration. Doubt, just as he'd intended. That night, Silas sat at the kitchen table, textbooks spread around him, but his eyes were locked on a single sheet of paper, a math contest flyer, statewide, high school level, open entry. The registration deadline was next week. He didn't know if he should do it. Not because he couldn't win, but because he was beginning to understand what winning might cost. His mom entered quietly, taking off her nurse scrubs. "You eat?" she asked. "Yeah." He lied. She kissed the top of his head, glanced at the books, and then at the flyer. "You thinking about it?" He hesitated, then nodded. "You should," she said. "You're ready."
"But what if they come at me again?" he asked.
His voice cracked just slightly, the only sign of the weight he carried. She sat down across from him, her eyes tired, her body exhausted, but her voice steady. "Let them," she said. "They only come for the ones who scare them." Silas looked back at the flyer. He picked up his pen, but down the hall inside his school email inbox, a new message had just landed. From Principal Denning. Subject: Academic concern. Silas Merrick. Buddy, thank you for raising this, Mr. Rowan. I'll look into it personally. Let's keep this quiet for now. Mr. Rowan quietly emails the principal with one request. Investigate this boy's academic record. The morning after Silas's moment in math club, the hallways of Meadowridge Middle buzzed with whispers. It wasn't loud or obvious, just the kind of murmuring that clung to a student's shoulders long before anyone said a word to their face. Silas felt it as soon as he walked through the front doors. Some glances were curious, others questioning. One or two held a smirk he couldn't quite decipher. He kept his pace steady. He always did. But as he passed room 3C on the way to his first period, Mr. Rowan didn't look up from his desk. He pretended to be absorbed in his laptop. Though Silas could sense the stiffness in the man's posture, like he was bracing for something he couldn't control. At the front office, Principal Margaret Denning sat behind a sleek desk, the morning light casting sharp angles across her tight blazer and perfectly arranged calendar. She had already read Mr. Rowan's email twice. Something about it didn't sit right, but not because she doubted the student's performance. It was the language. Possible unauthorized access. Unusual speed. The subtle implications were familiar. She opened Silas Merrick's file. No red flags. In fact, the opposite. Perfect attendance. Consistently high test scores. Comments from teachers about his strong comprehension and quiet diligence. And yet not once in 3 years had anyone flagged him for advanced placement or gifted enrichment. No recommendation letters. No honors nominations. Just a quiet pattern of being passed over. She closed the file slowly. Then picked up the phone. Have Silas Merrick sent to my office. In homeroom, Silas was halfway through a warm-up worksheet when the classroom door opened. A student aide stepped in, handed his teacher a slip, and left. Silas, the teacher said without emotion. Principal wants to see you. The room stirred. Someone whispered, "Ooh," under their breath. Silas stood without speaking, backpack slung on one shoulder. He didn't ask why. He already knew. Across town, in a modest 2-bedroom apartment that smelled faintly of coffee and lavender, Tasha Merrick flipped through her son's old report cards. She had saved every single one, filed neatly in a plastic bin beneath the bed. She wasn't searching for nostalgia today. She was looking for confirmation. It had always gnawed at her. The absence. No teacher ever pulled her aside to say, "He's ahead." No counselor ever mentioned acceleration or special programs. And every time she asked, she was given the same tired responses. He's doing well, but he's quiet. He's polite, but doesn't stand out. He's not quite leadership material. Those phrases sat in her memory like stains. Because what they really meant was, he doesn't act how we expect brilliance to look. They didn't see spark in restraint. They couldn't recognize confidence in silence. And they definitely didn't expect a boy like hers. Black, soft-spoken, self-taught to challenge their standards. Tasha knew her son's power. She had seen it at 6 years old, when he corrected her on a decimal, while splitting a restaurant bill. At 8, when he rewired the old radio his uncle threw out. At 10, when he taught himself the basics of Python off YouTube, and built a calculator app for her nurse shift hours. They missed it not because it wasn't there. They missed it because they weren't looking. In Principal Denning's office, Silas sat across from her with his backpack still on. He didn't slouch. He didn't lean forward. His body remained still, his eyes sharp. The principal folded her hands. "How's school going, Silas?" He raised an eyebrow slightly. "Fine. I understand you attended math club this week." Silas nodded, and there was an impressive performance. Another nod. Still neutral. She paused, then leaned forward. "I've received a concern from Mr. Rowan. He said you solved an advanced calculus problem in under a minute. Is that correct?" "It was 30 seconds, Silas corrected calmly. There was no pride in his tone. Just fact. "And have you studied that level of material before?" "Yes." "Where?" "At home." "Alone?"
Yes.
Principal Denning tilted her head. "No tutors?" "No." She looked at his file again. "You're not enrolled in our advanced placement track." No one offered. A silence stretched between them. "He's worried," she said finally, "that your performance may not have been entirely your own." Silas blinked once. "Because I got it right?" "Because of how fast you got it right." "That's not a reason to question me," he said. "That's a reason to ask why no one noticed earlier." There it was. Not anger. Not rebellion. Truth. And it stung. Denning closed the folder slowly. "We're going to look into your academic record," she said. "Just standard protocol." Silas stood. I know what this is. She didn't stop him. That afternoon, Tasha received a voicemail from the school. She listened twice before calling back, her voice calm but cold. You're investigating his what? The woman on the line fumbled. It's not an accusation, ma'am. It's just that one of our staff flagged unusual performance. We're conducting a routine review of his history. You mean the history you ignored? Ma'am. No. Don't ma'am me. For years I've asked about why my son wasn't being challenged. I asked why he wasn't in advanced placement. I asked why no one ever saw what I saw. And now that he proves himself, you want to audit him like a suspect. The line went quiet. Tasha's breathing slowed. Then in a lower tone she said, You want to investigate something? Start with why the file you're opening for the first time is 3 years overdue for recognition. She hung up before hearing the reply. Back at school, Silas walked the hallways differently now. Not because he'd changed, but because he could feel the gaze of the system shifting around him. Teachers eyed him longer during lessons. Classmates hesitated before asking to borrow a pencil. He wasn't being celebrated. He was being watched. That night he stared at the ceiling above his bed. The quiet in his room was heavy. Not lonely, just full. His mind replayed every meeting, every blank look from past teachers, every moment they chose someone louder, someone whiter, someone easier to believe. He had spent so long proving himself without reward, he'd almost forgotten what it felt like to finally be seen, only to have that visibility turned against him. In the living room, Tasha sat in silence too. She looked at the math contest flyer still on the table, then picked up her phone. She called a friend, someone who worked in education advocacy. We need to talk, she said. It's about my son. At school the next morning, a counselor opened Silas's file again. She added a note to his profile, concerns raised about academic integrity. Pending further review. No one asked Silas for his side of the story. No one checked the pattern of overlooked potential. No one revisited the missed opportunities, the ignored requests, the years of quietly excelling in a system that had never wanted to acknowledge him. Instead, the system folded in on itself, not to lift him, but to contain him. And while students buzzed about prom themes and cafeteria rumors, Silas sat at the back of the library, staring at a new email on his screen. Subject, meeting request. From Principal Denning. To Silas Merrick. Body. Please report to the office at 1:15 p.m. today. I have a few questions regarding your coursework and testing history. He closed the laptop, and in that moment, he knew the real test had just begun. The principal responds to Mr. Rowan's email, not with support, but by calling Silas into the office for questioning. The hallway outside Principal Denning's office felt colder than the rest of Meadowridge Middle, as if the air itself stiffened before reaching this part of the building. Silas stood in front of the closed door, backpack hanging by one strap, the printed summons crumpled slightly in his hand. He could hear muffled voices inside, administrative tones, clipped and hushed as though something important was being discussed, something fragile, something about him. He knocked softly. Come in, Principal Denning called. Silas stepped inside. The office was too neat, too polished, pictures of smiling students on the wall, a framed certificate that read Equity in Education Award from 5 years ago, and a single small plant that leaned toward the light as though desperate to escape. Sit down, Silas, she said. He did. Denning folded her hands neatly on the desk, her nails immaculately trimmed, her eyes attempting warmth but revealing calculation beneath. I want to talk to you about what happened in math club. Silas kept his posture straight. Okay. There were some concerns raised, she continued, specifically about the calculus problem you solved. It was unusually fast, faster than we would expect at your grade level. Silas blinked once. Is that a problem? It might be, she said carefully. Given the circumstances. He waited. She exhaled through her nose, choosing words as if selecting sharp stones. Some staff members are worried that perhaps you had access to the material beforehand, or that maybe you memorized solutions from an advanced source. Silas stared at her, feeling the weight of the accusation sink in slowly, like sand filling his shoes. You're saying I cheated? Her tone softened, but only on the surface. I'm saying we need to investigate how you arrived at that answer. He didn't speak. He didn't trust himself to. Instead, he watched her. The way she leaned back, the false patience in her smile, the expectation in her eyes. She thought he would explain, defend, justify, but every part of him felt locked in place, not from guilt, but from disbelief. His silence stretched 5 long seconds. Denning's expression shifted. She interpreted it exactly how he feared she would. Silas, she said slowly. Silence isn't helping you. It's not supposed to help anything, he said quietly. I didn't do anything wrong. Her eyes hardened. Then you should have no issue answering the questions. I don't have to prove something I didn't do, he replied. His voice trembled, not from fear but from the hurt blooming beneath his ribs. Denning closed his file. Given your inability to clarify how you solved that equation, I'm taking this matter seriously. We can't allow academic misconduct to go unchecked, especially in competitive spaces. Silas felt the heat in his throat, a slow burn rising behind every breath. Why is it misconduct just because it was me? She blinked. Excuse me? You didn't say anything when the other students solved questions fast. You didn't ask them if they cheated. That's different, she said too quickly. How?
Denning stiffened.
She opened his folder again, flipping through pages she had already memorized that morning. Your academic record doesn't align with performance at that level. My record reflects where you placed me, he said. Not what I can do. She swallowed. Silas, that's enough. He lowered his gaze, jaw tightening. But she didn't see a confident boy standing his ground. She saw a defiant student refusing to cooperate. She scribbled a note onto a form. Due to these unresolved concerns, I'm suspending you from math club until we finish our review. Silas's head snapped up. You're suspending me? It's temporary. For something I didn't do. For something we cannot yet verify, she corrected gently. But the gentleness was a mask. This is not a punishment. Yes, it is, he said, barely above a whisper. Denning tapped her pen. I will be calling your mother to discuss further steps. Silas inhaled slowly, forcing down the sting building behind his eyes. He wouldn't cry here. Not in front of her. Not over this. May I go back to class now? He asked. Denning hesitated, then nodded. Yes, you may go. He rose, placed the strap of his backpack over his shoulder, and walked to the door. Before he reached it, Denning said softly, Silas? He paused. If you tell the truth now, she said, it will be easier for everyone. He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened the door and walked out. When Tasha Merrick's phone rang during her lunch break, she assumed it was the hospital calling her in early. She answered briskly, This is Tasha. Hello, Miss Merrick. This is Principal Denning from Meadow Ridge Middle School. The tone, polite but clipped, made the hairs rise on Tasha's arms. Is Silas okay? Yes, he's fine physically, Denning said. But we need to discuss an academic concern. Tasha leaned against the break room counter. What kind of concern? Well, Silas displayed unexpected advanced skills in math club yesterday. Tasha smiled despite herself. So he did well. That's the issue, Denning said. The level was beyond what we believe he should have been able to do, especially with such speed. Tasha's smile vanished. Are you saying he cheated? We're saying we need to determine whether his performance was legitimate. Tasha inhaled sharply. How dare you assume it wasn't? We're not assuming, Denning insisted. We're reviewing. Until then, Silas is being temporarily suspended from math club. The break room suddenly felt too small, too bright. Tasha pressed her palm to the counter to keep steady. Suspended. Without proof? Without hearing his side? Denning's voice softened falsely. We're simply following protocol. No, Tasha said firmly. You're following bias. Ms. Merrick. For years I asked why he wasn't in advanced classes. Tasha continued. You told me he wasn't a leader. You told me he was quiet. You told me he wasn't a right fit. Now he finally shows what he can do, and you assume he's lying. That's not. It is, Tasha said. It always has been. The silence on the line was thick. Tasha closed her eyes, breath trembling. I'm coming to the school after my shift. We're not letting this slide. Denning cleared her throat. Of course. We can schedule a meeting. No meeting, Tasha said. A reckoning. She hung up. Silas spent the rest of the day in a fog. Teachers called on him, but he barely heard. Students whispered, but he barely cared. Every part of him replayed the principal's questions, the cold phrasing, the suspicion threading beneath every word. In the cafeteria, he sat alone. When Mason from math club walked past with his tray, he slowed just slightly, then kept walking. A girl from his English class glanced in his direction, then quickly away. Someone further down the table murmured, Is that the kid? He stopped listening. The world felt blurry, distant, too loud and too quiet at the same time. When the final bell rang, he didn't rush out like the other students. He walked slowly toward the exit, dragging his fingertips along the metal lockers, grounding himself in the cold surface. Outside, the air was sharp, clear. It smelled like rain was coming. He sat on the front steps of the school, opened his notebook, and stared at the scribbled equations on the page. They used to bring him comfort. Now they felt like evidence in a trial he never agreed to.
Minutes passed.
Finally, his mother's car pulled up to the curb with a sharp stop. Tasha stepped out, still in her scrubs, the exhaustion on her face replaced by something else now, something fierce. She approached him and knelt down slightly so her eyes met his. "You okay?" "No," he whispered. She nodded once. Not surprised, not shocked, just steady. "We're not letting them do this to you." Silas swallowed. "I didn't even say anything wrong. I just solved the problem." "I know. They think I cheated." "I know." For a moment, neither spoke. Then she stood. "Get in. We're going somewhere." Silas rose slowly, backpack dragging behind him. "Where?" he asked. Tasha's voice was quiet, but lined with steel. "To someone who knows exactly what to do when schools try to bury kids like you." Silas looked up. Tasha unlocked her phone. On the screen was the contact of a well-known educational equity advocate in their county. Someone who had challenged school districts before. Someone who exposed patterns. Someone who didn't back down. Tasha pressed call. Silas's mother decides she's had enough and contacts a local educational equity advocate. The front office at Meadow Ridge Middle buzzed with its usual morning routine. Phones ringing, staff shuffling papers, the click of keyboards humming beneath polite greetings. To anyone watching, it was business as usual. Principal Denning greeted parents with her signature poise. The receptionist passed out tardy slips with manufactured cheer, and the trophy case glistened beneath artificial light. But somewhere past the outer polish, behind password-protected inboxes and hidden faculty-only threads, something darker was growing. Inside the internal staff portal, a private email chain had quietly taken on a life of its own. Subject: Math Club Concerns. From Blake Rowan. To Academic Committee. "He's not like the other kids," Rowan had typed late the night before. His attitude was different, detached, possibly combative. He refused to answer simple questions about how he learned the material. And the speed. "Honestly, it's concerning." He hit send. Within an hour, responses trickled in. A science teacher replied, "That boy? He barely speaks in my class. Doesn't participate. Always scribbling. Could be some kind of behavioral issue." A guidance counselor added, "His mother's come in a few times. Protective, defensive. Makes things harder for him, not easier." Another comment followed, masked in neutral language. "Some students are naturally gifted, but giftedness usually shows itself in collaborative spirit, not isolation." Words like different, detached, unusual, doesn't fit in. They piled up like coated stones. No one outright said it. No one used the word they all meant. But the tone was unmistakable. They didn't trust Silas because Silas didn't behave like the genius they imagined. He wasn't charming. He didn't smile enough. He didn't play the politics of performance. He was brilliant, quietly, independently, and without their permission. And that made him dangerous. Not every teacher joined the chorus. Mrs. Elise Harmon, a quiet but respected language arts teacher in her early 30s, sat at her desk reading the thread in growing disbelief. She scrolled down slowly, rereading phrases that masked bias behind civility. She had seen Silas's writing portfolio. His analytical essays were razor-sharp, far above grade level. He rarely spoke in class, but when he did, his insight silenced the room. She'd once asked him why he didn't participate more. His answer was quiet. "Because I'm not sure people want to hear it." Now as she read her colleagues, reducing him to a threat, Elise felt a cold fury bloom in her chest. She clicked reply. "I'd urge caution before we turn this into a character review. Silas is not combative. He's reserved. And frankly, I've never seen any signs of dishonesty. Quiet doesn't mean suspicious. It just means quiet. Maybe we need to reflect on what makes us so uncomfortable about students like him." She hovered over send, then clicked. The thread went silent for a full day. When it resumed, her message was completely ignored. That evening, Elise sat at her kitchen table, a mug of tea going cold beside her, her laptop screen still open to the faculty portal. She replayed the words she'd read, the way even well-meaning teachers had bought into the narrative Rowan was building. They didn't want to believe a black boy could outperform their expectations without trickery. It wasn't malice, it was bias so deep it wore the mask of reason. But she couldn't let it slide. She pulled open a secondary drive folder on her computer, one she kept for incidents just like this. Over the years, Elise had seen too many students of color passed over, disciplined unfairly, and written off before their potential could surface. She had started documenting patterns, emails, grade discrepancies, comment threads, disciplinary trends. She copied several of the relevant files to a flash drive, then paused. She opened Silas's most recent essay from her class, an analysis of Langston Hughes's theme for English B. The final line echoed in her mind, "I guess being colored doesn't make me not like the same things other folks like who are other races." She closed the laptop. The next day she slipped the flash drive into her pocket, before school. Meanwhile, Silas walked through the halls of Meadow Ridge like someone being trailed by invisible shadows. Students still talked to him, some out of habit, some with hesitance. The teachers had changed. Subtly, he noticed how eyes lingered longer, how questions became slightly more patronizing. One asked if he needed help keeping up. Another reminded him to double-check for plagiarism before submitting homework, even though he never had a single infraction. Every smile felt like a setup. Every compliment sounded like surveillance. And through it all, no one told him what was happening behind closed doors. But Silas could feel it. After 7th period, as Silas closed his locker, Mrs. Harmon approached him. She rarely stopped students in the hall. Her style was more behind the scenes, but this time she stepped directly into his line of sight. "Silas," she said gently. He turned, expression unreadable. "Do you have a few minutes?" He hesitated, glancing toward the door. She noticed. "Not for school stuff," she said. "Just something I think you should have." He followed her to her classroom. It was empty, lights low, a faint trace of lavender in the air from the diffuser she kept near the window. It always smelled like calm in her room, one of the few spaces in the school that didn't feel like it was pressing down on him. She closed the door behind them, then reached into her desk drawer and held out a small black flash drive. "What's this?" he asked. Her voice was low. "Careful. Let's just say, some teachers don't always speak as fairly about students as they should. I can't change the system overnight, but I can make sure it doesn't bury the truth." Silas didn't move. "This is for you," she said. "It has email threads, documentation, things you may need, just in case things escalate." He took it slowly, eyes flickering with confusion, gratitude, and something darker, recognition. "You're not crazy," she said, "and you're not alone." Silas looked down at the drive. It felt heavier than it should. "Thank you," he said quietly. Mrs. Harmon nodded once. "Just be careful who you trust with it." As he left the room, the flash drive now hidden deep in his backpack, Silas felt something shift in his chest. Not hope, not yet, but something close, because now he had proof. And someone was finally willing to say the part out loud that others only whispered in coded language. But just as he stepped back into the hallway, his phone buzzed in his pocket. A new email. From unknown. Subject: "You're being watched." That teacher reaches out to Silas privately and gives him a flash drive with something on it. Just in case. Silas sat at the edge of his bed, the room dim except for the bluish glow of his laptop screen. The house was quiet, his mother still at work, dinner cold on the counter. The flash drive from Mrs. Harmon lay in his palm, small and unassuming. It felt almost absurd that something so light could hold so much weight. He took a slow breath, slid the drive into the USB port and waited. The screen blinked once, then opened. A folder appeared, Merrick Evidence. Inside were dozens of files, PDFs, screenshots, email threads, and spreadsheets. Silas opened the first document, labeled Referral Stats, Honors Placement, 5 years. He scanned it. Rows of student names, columns with GPA, test scores, and a final column labeled Teacher Recommendation for Advanced Track. A pattern emerged quickly. White students with GPAs in the low 3s were greenlit for honors. Black students with 4.0s were marked Needs Review, or Not Recommended at this time. Silas's eyes narrowed as he filtered by race. Out of nearly 150 advanced placement referrals over 5 years, only 7 were black students. He checked their scores. All of them had GPAs over 3. One had perfect scores, and still the comment read, "Strong performance but lacks consistency in group settings." Silas felt something twist in his chest. Not shock. He already knew. But now he could see it. Name by name. Number by number. Bias laid bare in formulas, and notes dressed up as professionalism. He clicked open a Word document, titled Internal Staff Observations. Academic Behaviors. The language chilled him. Student shows potential but demonstrates a defiant streak. Promising, but lacks discipline. Recommend monitoring. Appears detached. Leadership qualities unclear. The same phrases repeated themselves, over and over. The same labels. The same deflections. Lacks discipline. Needs guidance. Could benefit from closer supervision. And almost every time, they were about black students, boys like him. Quiet. Smart. Dismissed. Silas leaned back. His hands clenched at his sides. His heart pounded, not from fear, but fury. These weren't isolated oversights. They were deliberate patterns wrapped in neutral words. This wasn't about a single math problem anymore. This was about a system. He opened another folder, subject discussion thread, behavioral trends. There, in an email dated just 2 months earlier, Mr. Rowan had written, certain students show sharp aptitude, but their attitudes can be off-putting. When they don't engage like the others, it creates disruption, even when they're technically right. Another teacher had replied, we can't reward behavior that undermines our culture of collaboration.
The response that followed.
Agreed. This is why we must screen for fit, not just ability. Fit. The word stuck in Silas's throat. How many times had that word been used to politely shut the door in someone's face? He remembered being passed over for student council in 6th grade, even after submitting the best campaign proposal. He remembered when his project for the science fair was removed last minute due to space, even though it had scored the highest in preliminary judging. He remembered his mother coming home from parent-teacher conferences, eyes tired, voice tight. They said you're smart, baby, just not the right fit for what they're building. Now he understood what that meant. It meant, not like them. It meant, don't speak too well. Don't shine too bright. Don't solve problems too fast. Or worse, don't remind them what they refuse to see. Down the hall, the front door clicked open. Tasha walked in, kicking off her shoes, rubbing her temples. Her nursing shift had been brutal. Back-to-back emergencies. Short staff and barely a moment to breathe. But as soon as she stepped into the quiet apartment, something felt off. Silas? She called. In my room. She walked in, and when she saw his face, she stopped. He was sitting upright, eyes locked on the screen. His jaw tight. What is it? She asked softly. He turned the laptop toward her. She stepped closer, reading quickly, her eyes darting across the screen, her breath caught in her throat. They wrote this about you? She asked. Not just me, Silas said. Look at the dates, the names. This has been going on for years. Dasha scrolled further. Her hands trembled as she opened each file. The names, some she recognized. A neighbor's son, a boy from church, a girl she remembered, from Silas's 2nd grade class, who had moved away after being told she was unfocused. Her throat tightened. She thought of every meeting, every note, every call that made her second-guess her son. Just a little. And now, here it was, undeniable. You were never the problem, she whispered. I know, Silas said. His voice was cold now, focused. Tasha sat beside him, the quiet stretching between them like a wire pulled taut. Then she said it. This can't stay private. Silas looked at her. We can't just give it to the principal or wait for them to bury it, she said. They already tried to make you the villain. He nodded once, slowly. They wanted to make sure no one like me ever made it past that room, he said. Then we show the world what's really happening, she replied. Tasha stood up, grabbed her phone and searched her contacts. One name stared back at her. Jordan Clare, education reporter, Georgia Free Press. They'd met at a PTA meeting 3 years ago, when the school tried to eliminate an arts program that disproportionately benefited Black and Latino students. Jordan had been sharp, relentless, and unafraid to burn bridges. Tasha pressed call. The line rang twice. Then, connect. Jordan Clare, the voice said. Jordan, it's Tasha Merrick. There was a pause. Silas's mom? Yes. I need to show you something. What's going on? They're trying to destroy my son's reputation. And I've got a flash drive full of proof they've been doing it to kids like him for years. Jordan didn't even hesitate. Where can we meet? Later that evening. In a quiet booth at a downtown diner, Tasha slid the flash drive across the table. Jordan, mid-30s, notebook always half-filled, wore the sharpness of someone used to making people uncomfortable in the name of truth. She plugged it into her laptop and began scrolling. Her eyebrows furrowed. She read faster, then slower, then stopped altogether. "This is," she muttered. "This is damning." Tasha didn't speak. She just waited. Jordan looked up. "Do you understand what you're holding here?" "Yes," Tasha said. "A pattern." "No," Jordan replied. "A weapon." Silas sat quietly beside his mother, watching, listening, learning the cadence of how injustice breaks, not with fists, not with fire, but with facts, when the truth is too heavy to ignore. Jordan's fingers flew across her keyboard, copying files. "I'm going to need statements. You, Silas. Maybe that teacher, Harmon, if she'll go on record. And I want to talk to other parents too, ones who've seen this before." Tasha nodded. "I'll get them." Jordan leaned back, her voice low. "Once this runs, they're going to try and discredit all of you. Be ready." "I've been ready," Tasha said. "They just didn't know it." Jordan smiled for the first time. Not kindly, but with fire. "Let's burn the whole thing open." As they stood to leave, Silas turned to Jordan. "Do you think they'll care?" he asked. "People?" Jordan paused. "They'll care," she said. "Because for the first time, they won't be able to pretend they didn't see it." Tasha decides to take this public. She calls a journalist. The story broke on a Thursday morning. Tasha was folding laundry in the living room, the hum of the dryer keeping rhythm with her thoughts, when her phone lit up with a call from Jordan Clare. "It's live," Jordan said. "Front page, top of the digital edition." Tasha opened the link. The headline was impossible to ignore. "Black genius suspended for solving math too fast? Inside Meadow-Ridge Middle's academic bias scandal." Beneath it was a picture of Silas. Not the school's yearbook headshot, but a candid one Jordan had taken the night they met at the diner. He was seated next to his mother, the laptop open before him, his eyes lit by the screen, serious and sharp. The article was relentless. It detailed the incident in math club, the suspension, the flash drive full of years-long discriminatory patterns, and quotes from anonymous teachers who admitted the bias had gone unspoken for too long. Within 2 hours, it had been shared 3,000 times. By noon, the number had crossed 50,000. At Meadow-Ridge Middle, the building stirred with sudden tension. First came the texts, the hallway whispers, then came the cameras. By third period, 2 local news vans were parked in front of the school, antennas stretching toward the sky. Reporters waited at the main entrance, notebooks ready, microphones clipped to collars. They weren't shouting questions yet, but they were watching every face that entered, hoping to spot the boy from the story. Inside, students scrolled through the article between classes. "Yo, this is about Silas, right?" one boy said, holding up his phone. "He really got suspended for being too smart?" A girl at the lunch table replied. "My mom said she's writing to the school board. She said this stuff's been going on forever." Teachers tried to redirect attention to lesson plans, but the story was louder than their voices. In room 3C, Mr. Rowan sat stiffly behind his desk, his laptop open but untouched. He had read the article at 7:04 a.m., and again at 7:06. Every time he saw his own words quoted. "He's different, detached, possibly combative." His stomach turned, though not with regret, with dread. He could feel the shift in the building, the weight of scrutiny he'd never experienced before. Silas sat in the back of the library, earbuds in, but no music playing. He watched as students stared at him from across the room, some with awe, others with hesitance. A few looked away quickly when he met their eyes. One whispered, "Is that him?" to a friend who already knew. He hadn't spoken to anyone all day, not even the teachers who now seemed overly cautious around him, trying to sound supportive in clipped, nervous tones. "Hang in there," one of them had said that morning, without explanation. Another added, "We're reviewing how this all happened, just so you know." But Silas did know, and he wasn't interested in small apologies wrapped in panic. He opened his school-issued Chromebook and refreshed the article. Now the share count read. He closed it and sat still. The silence inside him was no longer fear. It was power being sharpened. That evening, the story hit national news. A CNN online piece followed by a Twitter storm led by education advocates and celebrities alike. Hashtags started trending. "Let Silas learn." "Bias in the books." "Math is not a race test." People began digging deeper. Old PTA meeting minutes surfaced online. Notes where Tasha's concerns had been dismissed, paraphrased into bureaucratic phrases like parent over-engagement or pushy follow-ups. A viral TikTok stitched together quotes from the flash drive, the repeated promising but lax discipline verdict, stamped across black students' files. It ended with a zoom on the final line of Silas's referral record. Recommend close monitoring. Not AP ready. The video crossed 1 million views in a day. Jordan Clare was flooded with interview requests, but she declined them all, saying the story wasn't hers to spotlight. It belongs to the Merricks, she posted, and to every student like Silas who's been told their excellence is a threat. The school district responded late the next morning. A generic press release hit their social media accounts and inboxes at the same time. We are aware of the recent story involving a student at Meadow Ridge Middle School. We take all concerns seriously. At this time, we are conducting an internal review of academic placement protocols and remain committed to equity and transparency. We will refrain from further comment pending that review. Silas read it at the kitchen table while his mom flipped eggs on the stove. That's it? He asked. That's their big response? Tasha didn't look up. They're trying to ride it out. By saying nothing? By saying just enough to sound busy, but not enough to be held accountable. Silas pushed the eggs around his plate but didn't eat. They still haven't apologized, he said. They're more worried about the article than what they did. Tasha turned, her eyes tired but fierce. That's why we don't stop here. By Friday, a protest was scheduled outside the district office. Parents, students, and community members planned to march. Posters were being printed. A student-led coalition had launched a website documenting other stories from the district. Anonymous letters and first-person accounts of years of similar erasure. Mrs. Harmon, the teacher who gave Silas the flash drive, received an unsigned memo suggesting her behavior had been unprofessional and potentially disruptive to internal cohesion. She didn't respond, but that afternoon she sent another file to Jordan Clare, disciplinary reports disproving the district's earlier claims. Still, through all the chaos, one man remained silent. Mr. Rowan. He didn't speak to reporters, didn't post online, didn't address his classes beyond the syllabus. But something had changed in his gait. Slower, tenser, as though waiting for an invisible hit. He no longer ate in the staff lounge. He no longer corrected students with smugness. And when he saw Silas in the hall now, he looked away. Because now, the mask was off. That night, alone in his dimly lit home, Rowan opened his mailbox. Just bills, a grocery coupon booklet, and one white envelope. No return address, handwritten in clean, careful lettering. He opened it with mild curiosity, not even seated yet. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No header, no signature, only one line typed in bold, all caps. You picked the wrong kid. His stomach dropped. He looked out his front window. The street was quiet, too quiet. The paper trembled slightly in his hand, not because of fear for his safety, but fear of something worse, exposure. Because the truth was, he had known Silas was telling the truth from the start. He just hadn't wanted him to be right. And now, the country knew. Mr. Rowan receives an anonymous envelope at his home, with only one sentence: you picked the wrong kid. The air inside the Meadow Ridge Middle School gymnasium buzzed like a wire straining under too much weight. Foldable chairs filled every inch of the floor, with people standing shoulder to shoulder along the back wall and lining the bleacher. The usual echo of bouncing basketballs and shouting students had been replaced by the low hum of anticipation, nervous energy, and righteous anger. A long folding table was positioned near the gym stage, where the school board members sat in a tight row, stiff, composed, and visibly tense. Behind them hung a bland banner with the words, "Every student, every voice, every day." But tonight, the voices in the room weren't generic. They were specific, they were personal, and they weren't going to be ignored. Tasha and Silas sat in the fourth row, just left of center. Silas wore a simple navy button-up and black jeans. His backpack was tucked under his chair, but inside it was the flash drive, the same one that had ignited the storm. Tasha's hands were clasped tightly in her lap, knuckles white. Her eyes scanned the board members slowly, measuring each expression. The superintendent, Dr. Harold Lighton, sat at the center of the table, his face frozen in that awkward balance between concern and damage control. The meeting was scheduled for 1 hour. It would go for 3. "Thank you for coming," the school board president began, voice caught somewhere between professional and strained. This meeting has been called in response to the recent article published regarding Meadow Ridge Middle School's academic placement process. We understand there are concerns, and we're here to listen. The moment she said it, listen, the murmurs started. From the back of the gym, a woman stood abruptly. She didn't wait for the microphone. My name is Monica Abrams, she said, voice clear and firm. I graduated from this district in 2009. I was valedictorian, and in my junior year, my counselor told me she was surprised I made it that far without getting caught cheating, because apparently, scoring high as a black student meant I was suspect, not smart. Heads turned. Some gasped. Others nodded slowly. She pointed toward the board. This isn't new, it's just the first time someone wrote it down. The crowd erupted in claps and quiet shouts of agreement. The board tried to maintain order, tapping the mic and calling for calm, but the dam had broken. Speaker after speaker approached the stand. A parent of a fourth grader described how her daughter was told not to get her hopes up about the gifted program. A former teacher recounted how referrals for black students were often dismissed as inflated by parental pressure. A current high school senior shared how he'd stopped raising his hand in advanced classes because his questions were met with eye rolls from teachers. Each testimony was raw, unscripted, and louder than anything the board could contain. But Silas didn't speak. Neither did Tasha. Because tonight, they didn't have to. Tonight, the town was speaking for them. Dr. Layton cleared his throat, his hands folded neatly on the table. He had waited over an hour for a pause in the comments, a chance to recenter the narrative. Let me be clear, he began, leaning slightly toward the mic. We have always believed in the success of every student. If there are individual failures, we will address them. But we must remember this district has a long record of academic excellence. The audience shifted uncomfortably. He continued, cherry-picking isolated documents and assuming systemic issues from individual cases is dangerous. We are committed to equity, but also to fairness to all students. A woman in the front stood. So where's the apology? Layton paused. Excuse me? You've heard hours of testimony. Where is the acknowledgement that harm was done? Where is the apology to Silas Merrick? Silas didn't move. Every eye in the room turned to him. Dr. Layton adjusted his tie. This is an ongoing investigation. It wouldn't be appropriate. Appropriate? Someone shouted. You suspended a kid for solving math too fast. Another voice rang out. Tasha closed her eyes for half a second. Her breath was steady, but her fingers trembled slightly. Layton glanced at the board president, silently begging for a lifeline. But none came. Just when the room began to boil, a quiet voice took the mic. Mrs. Harmon stepped forward, her usually composed expression unreadable. She adjusted her glasses and began. I'm Elise Harmon. I teach English at Meadow Ridge Middle. The room hushed. She continued. I gave Silas the flash drive. Gasps. I did it because I knew, if this stayed internal, it would disappear. Just like the dozens of recommendations for students who never got advanced placement. Just like the flags raised about our biased discipline practices. Just like the gifted black kids who were labeled distracted instead of brilliant. One board member tried to interrupt. Mrs. Harmon, this isn't. She didn't stop. I've been here 7 years. I've watched students like Silas go unnoticed, unsupported, and then punished when they exceed expectations. And I'm tired of watching it happen in silence. The crowd erupted into applause. But it was more than just noise. It was vindication. After the meeting adjourned, the gym remained full. People lingered, forming small circles of conversation, disbelief, and resolve. A local reporter interviewed Monica Abrams, near the bleachers. 2 parents exchanged contacts, planning a follow-up gathering. Silas remained seated. He stared at the folding table where the board had sat, now empty, its plastic surface littered with water bottles and untouched agenda packets. Tasha stood beside him, her hand on his shoulder. Ready? She asked. He nodded. They started to walk toward the exit when a voice behind them called, Ms. Merrick? They turned. A woman in her 60s, gray curls framing a weathered face, stepped forward. Her ID badge identified her as board member, Eloise Garner. Tasha tensed, but Eloise leaned in, lowering her voice. I saw the data, she whispered. The real files, not just what was leaked. There's more, much more. Tasha's eyes narrowed. Then speak on it. I can't, Eloise said quickly. Not yet, but I can show you. Silas glanced between them. Meet me tonight, Eloise said. After 9, corner of Jefferson and Maple. There's an old admin building we used to use for off-site storage. I'll leave the door unlocked. Tasha hesitated. Is this safe? No, Eloise replied. But it's necessary. She turned and walked away before they could respond. Tasha looked at Silas. His face was calm, but his eyes burned. Do we go? She asked. He didn't pause. Yes. Because now the system was cracking, and someone inside was ready to help break it open. A board member privately approaches Tasha and says, I know where the real data is. Meet me tonight. The old administrative building sat tucked behind a shuttered strip mall on the corner of Jefferson and Maple, its windows boarded on the west side, and vines creeping along cracked brick. It had once been the district's temporary overflow offices, but after a failed renovation budget years back, it was all but forgotten, except by those who remembered what it held. Tasha and Silas pulled into the lot at 9:04 p.m. The night was dense with humidity, and the streetlights blinked intermittently, casting uneven shadows across the crumbling sidewalk. Silas clutched his backpack tightly, not for safety, but readiness. Tasha scanned the surrounding buildings, her breath shallow. The door was propped open by a broken filing cabinet drawer. They stepped inside. The building smelled of dust, old wiring, and damp paper. The linoleum tiles were faded, curled at the corners, and the walls bore long-forgotten district flyers for past elections and PTA fundraisers. Light from Tasha's phone cast long shadows down the narrow hallway. At the end, in room 2114, Eloise Garner waited. She was already inside when they entered, standing over a dusty desk piled with thick binders and 2 open file boxes. Her expression was pale, urgent, the weight of what she'd uncovered pressing visibly on her spine.
I didn't think you'd come, she whispered.
You said you had the real files, Tasha replied. Eloise nodded. These aren't on the main network. They were removed from active use years ago. Buried. You had to know exactly what to search for to even find the directory. Silas stepped forward, peering over the open box. What he saw made his breath catch. The first binder was labeled Placement Records. The second, Disciplinary Referrals by Demographic. Internal Use Only. The third, Surveillance and Flagged Students Confidential. Eloise gestured toward the table. What you saw on that flash drive was only the tip. This is the iceberg. Tasha opened the first binder. Within seconds, the pattern was clear. Rows of student names, standardized test scores, teacher recommendation notes, and a final column labeled Advanced Track Status. She flipped to a page marked 2 students with identical test scores, 1 white, 1 black. The white student's recommendation read, Quiet confidence, strong potential, gifted referral approved. The black student's bright but reserved, lacks engagement, referral denied. Tasha turned another page, then another. The same story, over and over. Silas opened a separate folder labeled Monitored Students, Non-Criminal Surveillance Reports. Inside were names, dozens of them, each flagged for behavioral observation. None had ever been suspended. Many had no infractions at all. Next to each name, race. Nearly 85% of those flagged were Black or Latino. And the reasons? Tends to isolate from peers. Appears distracted when others are focused. Does not make frequent eye contact with instructors. These were not security risks. These were children being cataloged for being different. For not conforming. For not blending in. Eloise's voice cracked. This goes back decades. It wasn't a policy, they'd never write it that way. But it was practice. We were told to use our instincts, to feel out leadership potential, to spot the students who'd thrive under pressure. But those instincts were shaped by bias. She held up a report from 19. Look at this. A disciplinary note for a 7th grade boy named Terrence. The incident? Gave a sarcastic response in class. The punishment? 3 days of in-school suspension. Below that, another student, a white girl, was documented for the same behavior. Her resolution, teacher conference. No formal discipline required. Silas stared at the report, the anger in his chest burning slow and deep. How did this stay hidden? He asked. Louise shook her head. Because it wasn't in one place. It was scattered. Memos, paper files, unused servers. And nobody wanted to piece it together. They told themselves it wasn't intentional. Tasha pulled out her phone. It doesn't matter what they told themselves. It matters what they did. She started snapping pictures. Page after page. File after file. Screenshots of login logs. Deleted referral forms. Even an internal memo from 2012 that read, Ensure all referrals align with student behavior profiles to avoid outliers. Outlier. That word again. Silas clenched his fists. We were never allowed to be the exception. Eloise lowered her voice. There's a file in the next box, labeled Academic Forecasts, not for distribution. It predicts student outcomes based on early behavior reports. Tasha opened the box. Inside was a spreadsheet that chilled her to her core. Each student was given a projected path, labeled leadership, at risk, average, or high support. Black and Latino students were disproportionately marked, at risk, even when their grades matched those marked leadership. In some cases, the decision had been made in elementary school. These aren't predictions, Silas muttered. They're prophecies they made come true. Tasha's eyes welled. Eloise placed a hand on her shoulder. They used this to shape entire futures. And when one slipped through like Silas, they flagged him. That's why Rowan reacted the way he did. You weren't in their design. Tasha sent the photos to Jordan immediately. No caption, no explanation, just a flood of image files that needed no introduction. They left the building in silence. Eloise stayed behind, locking the boxes back in place. As they reached the car, Silas turned to his mother. You think this'll be enough? Tasha didn't answer right away. Then she said, It has to be. Jordan's call came just after midnight. Tasha answered on the first ring. You got them? I did, Jordan replied, her voice fast and shaken. Tasha, this is massive. I know. Jordan paused, then dropped her voice to a whisper. They just tried to shut me down. Tasha froze. What? I got a call from someone at my own paper editor-in-chief. He said I need to stop pursuing the story. Effective immediately. Based on what? He didn't say, just that it was bigger than me. Legal pressure. Possible defamation risks. Professional advice. Silas sat upright in bed, watching his mother's face change in real time. They're trying to bury it, Tasha said. No, Jordan replied. They're trying to scare us into burying it. She hesitated. Then added, I'm not stopping, but I may not be able to do it through official channels anymore. So what do we do? Tasha asked. Jordan's voice steadied. We go bigger. The journalist calls back, terrified. They just tried to shut me down. It started with silence, strategic, surgical silence. No official response, no legal notices, no direct threats, just the echoing quiet that follows when people in power are deciding how far they'll go to protect the system that made them powerful. Then came the first text. Tasha had just finished her shift, her body aching in places even sleep wouldn't reach, when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. The message was short. You don't know what you're messing with. Let it go. No punctuation. No signature. She read it twice, locked the screen, and told herself not to overreact. People lash out online all the time. It could be a troll. A coward. But 2 hours later, a second message arrived. This won't end well. For him or for you. Her hands tightened around the phone. It felt heavier than it had ever felt before. She didn't reply. She just took a screenshot. Then another. Jordan Clare, now working out of her home office, hadn't slept in 36 hours. Her editor had shut down the article series after her first leak, citing risk of institutional liability. But she kept digging, kept publishing through an independent platform, kept naming names, until she woke up one morning to find her car spray-painted. Liar. It was scrawled across the side door in red, thick, angry lines, dripping onto the pavement. She snapped a photo, hands shaking, then opened her trunk. Every file, every note, every copy she'd backed up was still intact. But the message was clear. They were watching. Silas had grown used to whispers in the hallway, but now the whispers had eyes. Everywhere he turned, someone was watching too long, too often. He could feel it. The way teachers paused when he passed. The way the security officer who used to nod at him now just stared. Last Tuesday, a gray sedan drove behind him for 6 blocks on his way home. No music, no honking, just distance and shadow. He turned corners, walked slower, then faster. The car never passed, never approached. Eventually, it turned off. But the chill in his spine didn't. That night, he told Tasha. She didn't say much. She just installed a tracking app on his phone and changed all the locks. The district's strategy arrived in the form of a polished video campaign. An email blast was sent to parents and staff. See how Meadow Ridge supports excellence for all students. The video featured a montage of multiracial students smiling in classrooms, teachers laughing with children, the superintendent shaking hands in the hallway. Midway through, A line of text appeared. Meadow Ridge is proud of our students, including those who challenge us to grow. But it was the final image that struck deepest. A silhouette of a boy, backpack slung over one shoulder, walking down a hallway. It looked like Silas. Too much like Silas. Except the voiceover said, "But we must always remember, excellence is more than talent. It's attitude. It's respect. It's humility." That night, a new hashtag trended briefly on local pages. Aggressive academics, dozens of accounts, most newly created, began commenting on Silas's story, with the same talking points. Seems like this kid had an attitude problem. Maybe he's smart, but smart doesn't excuse disrespect. There's more to the story. Always is. Bots. Every click led to the same pattern. No personal info, no post history. Just the same phrases copy-pasted under every article or video that mentioned Silas. Even his old posts, photos of science fair ribbons, math worksheets, birthday cupcakes were suddenly flooded with sarcastic comments. Tasha shut down his Instagram. Silas deleted his Twitter. They kept Facebook only to monitor the storm. But they didn't retreat. Not this time. Because the fire had already caught. And Silas? He was done shrinking. He started showing up at the local library every Thursday after school. Quietly. No announcements. No hashtags. Just a whiteboard. And a plastic bin of markers. And 6 students, black, brown, mixed, waiting for him with notebooks and silent hope. They came with questions about algebra, about graphs, about how to solve what their schools weren't teaching them to solve. Silas didn't teach like a teacher. He didn't pace or lecture. He listened, paused, then showed them how to find the answer inside the problem, and themselves. Word spread. The next week there were 12. The week after that, nearly 20. Tasha brought snacks. A neighbor printed flyers. A retired math professor dropped off boxes of old textbooks. No school administrator showed up. But one parent whispered, after a session, "They're watching this too. They're just not ready to say it." Silas looked at the boy next to her. 10 years old, shy and scribbling math equations, like his life depended on it. He whispered back, "Let them watch." On the 4th Thursday during one of the library sessions, Silas leaned over to help a girl struggling with fractions when he heard something sharp and wrong. It came from behind him, too loud for a whisper but too venomous for a joke. A voice. "I didn't know they were letting math thugs teach now." Silas turned. At the end of the hallway near the study carrels, a man in a beige sweater vest and teacher ID badge stood with a book in hand. His name was Mr. Chase, 8th grade history. He didn't look apologetic. He didn't even look away. Silas froze. The students around him fell silent. Tasha, who had just returned from refilling the snack tray, heard it too. She set the tray down slowly, walked toward the sound, eyes locked. "Repeat that," she said evenly. Mr. Chase scoffed. "It was a joke." "No," Tasha said. "It was a slur, packaged as sarcasm." He lifted a brow. "Don't be dramatic. You just called a group of kids math thugs," she snapped. "Say it clearly for the cameras this time." He turned pale. Because by now 2 parents had pulled out phones. Silas didn't move. He just stared at the man like he was solving an equation far uglier than numbers could hold. One of the younger students, Marcus, age 9, looked up at Silas and whispered, "Why'd he say that?" Silas placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "To remind us why we're here," he said softly. Tasha filed a formal complaint the next morning. But she didn't stop there. She called Jordan, told her everything. Jordan, voice calm but coiled, said, "Good. Let them bury themselves." Then she sent a reply text to the last anonymous number that had threatened Tasha. One word, try. One of the students he's tutoring is called a racial slur by another teacher. The official letter arrived, folded 3 times in a plain white envelope, slipped into Silas's homeroom folder without ceremony. It didn't bear any warning tone. No red stamp of urgency. Just clean, institutional language. Subject: emergency disciplinary review. Student: Silas Merrick. Date: Friday. Location: District Administrative Office. Allegation: incitement of disruption and insubordination. Silas read it once. Then again. His hands didn't shake this time. Tasha stood at the kitchen counter that night. Dinner forgotten, reading the same letter. Jordan was already on speakerphone. They're accusing him of inciting rebellion. Jordan's voice rang through the kitchen like a slap. "What is this?" Tasha's jaw tightened. "They're scared. He didn't just survive what they threw, he turned it into power. They want to shut him down before others stand up too." Jordan said. Before more kids show up to the library. Before more parents demand answers. Before the fire spreads. Silas sat at the table, calm but focused. Let them try. He opened his laptop. This time he was building his own defense. The accusation had come from Mr. Chase, the same teacher who had called Silas a math thug in the library, now spinning a new narrative. In his official report, he wrote, Silas Merrick has been encouraging other students to question and challenge their teachers. He's fostering an environment of defiance and disobedience under the guise of community tutoring. This goes beyond academics. It borders on incitement. It wasn't just a complaint, it was a strategy, a final smear. Turn leadership into threat. Turn influence into danger. Turn a boy teaching fractions into an enemy of order. Tasha called Eliza Bennett, the educational equity advocate she'd been connected with weeks earlier. We'll be ready, Eliza said firmly. Let them try and put this in writing. We'll bury them with the truth. The district building on hearing day was surrounded by a line of cars and quiet clusters of onlookers. The official capacity of the hearing room was 20. Nearly 50 people showed up. Most were told to wait in the lobby. Inside, the panel sat cold and poised. Superintendent Layton at the center, flanked by the district attorney, the school board president, and a junior administrator typing notes too fast to keep up. Silas entered with Tasha at his side. Jordan followed, notepad in hand. Eliza carried a binder stuffed with highlighted reports, and behind them, quiet but steady, walked Mrs. Harmon, the same teacher who'd given Silas the flash drive. The same teacher the district had tried to sideline. She wore no makeup, no smile, just quiet resolve. The superintendent leaned into the mic. This is a closed session. No video, no media. A voice from the crowd interrupted. I'm his mother. I'll record if I want. All eyes turned to Tasha, who stood, phone in hand, already filming. Her tone was calm. Her hand steady. This isn't just about my son anymore, she said. This is about a system that targeted him and wants to punish him for surviving it. Superintendent Layton shifted. Mrs. Merrick, if you continue. She's not alone, Eliza said, stepping forward. We're here as his legal representation. We've reviewed the policies. This hearing is administrative, not judicial. Therefore, we're allowed to document any proceeding for transparency. Layton glanced at the district attorney. The attorney didn't argue. Tasha kept filming. Mr. Chase was the first to speak. He stuck to his script, polite tone, careful phrasing, veiled accusations. Mr. Merrick is intelligent, no doubt, he said. But intelligence without discipline is dangerous. He's become a lightning rod for disruption. Students are walking out of class. Teachers feel undermined. And it all traces back to him. Tasha's lip curled slightly. Silas didn't flinch. Jordan scribbled a note. Mrs. Harmon leaned forward. You called him a math thug in a public space. In front of children. Would you like to tell the board why? Mr. Chase paled. That was taken out of context. There is no context, Harmon replied. Eliza slid a printout across the table. This is a transcript of multiple teacher messages referring to Silas and other black students as aggressive, uncooperative, or troublemakers. No discipline infractions. No disruptions logged, just coded language. She placed a second printout beside it. And here are the district's own notes recommending white students with lower grades for leadership programs, while students like Silas were denied. Repeatedly, the superintendent held up a hand. We're not here to relitigate past procedures. That's exactly what we're doing, Jordan snapped, standing now. Because this hearing isn't about Silas's behavior. It's about punishing him for what he exposed. Silence. One of the board members leaned forward. Mr. Merrick, would you like to respond? Silas stood slowly. His voice was quiet. But it carried. I didn't start anything, he said. I didn't build the system that called me a problem when I did everything right. I didn't ask to be watched, doubted, erased. He looked directly at Mr. Chase. But I also didn't shrink. He turned back to the panel. They say I caused disruption. But I'm not the one who forgot how to be fair. I'm not the one who turned a library into a battlefield. He paused. I just solved a math problem. Silence hung like smoke in the air. Tasha reached over and squeezed his hand. Superintendent Layton shifted again. This is clearly a charged situation. We recommend the board adjourn for private deliberation. No, a voice said from the back. The board turned. A man stood, phone held high. He was live streaming. Already, over 3,000 people were watching. The caption: student facing expulsion for teaching? I'm a parent, the man said, and I've had enough of these closed doors. Security began to move toward him. But then a second phone went up. Then a third. Within seconds, nearly every person in the back of the room had their camera out. Eliza smiled. Jordan glanced at the superintendent. You wanted silence, she said. But silence ended the day you tried to destroy a child for being brilliant. Leighton tried to speak, but his mic crackled. The audio dropped. But the live stream didn't. And now the world was watching again. The superintendent tries to adjourn the hearing, but a parent live streams it to thousands online. The video began with shaky camera work and the muffled voice of a father in the back row saying, I'm done watching them lie. But what followed was clear, unflinching truth. Silas Merrick, standing tall. Tasha calling out institutional silence. Mrs. Harmon naming systemic erasure. The superintendent fumbling to contain the fire. The live stream spread like a current lit under gasoline. Within an hour, the clip had over 800,000 views on TikTok. A stitched version of Silas's speech, backed by soft piano and overlaid with quotes from the flash drive files, went viral overnight. The caption read, "This is what brilliance under pressure looks like. Let Silas learn. Viral justice." By morning, Twitter exploded. Celebrities, educators, athletes, and public figures weighed in. A best-selling author tweeted, I was a Silas once, but no one believed me. Believe them now. A tech CEO shared the live stream, saying, this kid just rewrote the definition of resilience. Let's talk about real reform. A US senator retweeted it with, if we're serious about equity in education, we better start by listening to Silas Merrick. And then came the governor. A press release hit every major outlet by noon. The incident involving Meadow Ridge Middle School has raised serious concerns about systemic bias in academic placement and disciplinary practices. I am calling for an independent investigation into the district's policies and a state-level review of gifted program accessibility. Every student deserves to be seen, heard, and supported. By 2 p.m., every local news van had returned to the district office. This time they weren't asking politely. Inside the school, the atmosphere cracked wide open. More students came forward. Dozens of anonymous statements flooded Jordan's inbox. Stories that mirrored Silas's. A black 8th grader denied AP recommendation despite scoring top percentile. A Latina student flagged for behavioral observation after challenging an unfair grade. A biracial boy told he was too intense for leadership training. Teachers began whispering in corners, some quietly deleting emails, others scrambling to recontextualize past actions. A few tried to stay neutral, but neutrality now looked like complicity. The district issued another statement. This one was longer. It began with an acknowledgement. We recognize the pain many families have expressed and are actively reviewing all past disciplinary and placement records. Our commitment to equity is unwavering. But it wasn't enough. Not anymore. The superintendent, once guarded and untouchable, now looked over his shoulder at every meeting, and the reckoning began. Mr. Rowan was placed on immediate administrative leave. The official reason, pending an internal review of conduct and communication. Unofficially, his face had become the symbol of the district's rot. Someone painted the words "wrong kid" on the parking spot sign that once bore his name. Mr. Chase resigned before the district could suspend him. His statement blamed media hysteria and misinterpretations, but no one was listening. 3 more teachers were reassigned to non-student positions. 2 counselors were asked to step down from gifted review committees. But it wasn't just reassignment, it was exposure. One mother, whose daughter had never been recommended for enrichment programs, posted side-by-side screenshots of her child's evaluations next to the flash drive files. Her caption read, "My daughter was labeled average because she wasn't the right fit. That ends now." It was retweeted 400,000 times. Silas didn't speak to the press. He didn't post. He didn't need to. Because now his silence wasn't invisibility. It was presence. It was power. Everywhere he went, people whispered with respect instead of doubt. Librarians smiled wider. Neighbors nodded more often. Parents pulled their kids closer. Not away. One morning, an older woman stopped Tasha in the grocery store. "You don't know me," she said, "but your son gave my grandson back his confidence." Tasha blinked back tears. "He gave me mine too." And then the email came. It arrived just after midnight. Subject line, "Invitation, National STEM Vanguard Academy, 2020. The body was short, formal. Dear Silas Merrick, after reviewing your story, your academic performance, and your community leadership, we are honored to offer you admission to the Vanguard Academy, a national residential STEM program designed for the country's top young innovators. Your full scholarship covers tuition, housing, mentorship, and travel. You represent everything the future of education should be. Sincerely, Dr. Evangeline Rowe, Executive Director, Vanguard Academy. Silas read it 3 times. Then again. The school was real, elite, rare, selective. Only 50 students were admitted annually. Most were from private institutions, tech-rich districts, or had Ivy League parents with deep connections. Silas had never even heard of it, until that moment. He looked up at his mother, who sat across from him with cautious hope. "What does it say?" she asked. "They want me," he said softly. Tasha exhaled slowly, as if a breath she'd held for months was finally being released. But then Silas kept reading. At the bottom of the email, in smaller text, was the catch. Note, due to the unique media attention surrounding your recent story, the board would ask that you refrain from participating in any ongoing interviews, activism, or public campaigns while enrolled. We believe in nurturing brilliance without distraction. We appreciate your understanding. Silas froze. He turned the screen toward his mother. She read the final paragraph, then looked at her son. They didn't speak for a long moment. Finally, Tasha said, "They want your light, but not your fight." Silas nodded. He had dreamed of places like this, spaces that valued his brain, that didn't question his ability, that wouldn't erase his name from the roster, because he solved too quickly. But now, he understood what it would cost. "Silence," he whispered. "They want me to be brilliant as long as I stop being visible." Tasha placed her hand over his. "You don't owe them your silence," she said. "You earned your voice." He sat with it. The weight of legacy. The weight of choice. And then his phone buzzed. A text from one of the library kids. "Hey, Mr. Silas, can we go over geometry again this week?" He smiled. The work wasn't done. Silas is offered admission into a prestigious national STEM academy, but there's a catch. The offer from Vanguard Academy sat on the kitchen table for 3 days. It remained unopened after that first night, the email printed, the envelope mailed, the details clear. Silas had been given the golden ticket, a full scholarship to one of the nation's most prestigious STEM institutions, a future carved in steel and silicon, away from the whispers and surveillance of Meadow Ridge. But there was a cost, not in tuition, not in dollars, but in silence. Tasha read the line over and over again. "Refrain from participating in any ongoing interviews, activism, or public campaigns." The words weren't aggressive. They were dressed in civility, wrapped in professionalism. But they meant only one thing: your voice makes us nervous. She watched Silas from across the room. He wasn't pacing, or anxious, or angry. He was still, too still, like his brain was moving faster than his body could keep up. "You don't have to decide today," she finally said. "I know," Silas answered, "but everyone else already has." She looked at him. "The media wants to turn me into a symbol," he said. "The school district wants to erase me. Vanguard wants to showcase me, quietly. Everyone wants a piece, but no one wants the truth that got me here." Tasha crossed the room and sat beside him. "You deserve this," she said. "A real shot. A place that sees you. A place where you don't have to keep proving yourself every minute." Silas looked down at his hands. "But if I go, what happens to everyone still here?" By the end of the week, the headlines were louder than ever. Will he stay or go? The nation waits on Silas Merrick. STEM prodigy offered spot at Vanguard, but will activism hold him back? From math club to movement, the rise of Silas Merrick. They called it a choice between promise and purpose, as if the two were mutually exclusive. But Silas knew better, and the pressure mounted. Vanguard emailed again, politely pressing for a response. The media reached out to Tasha directly. Jordan, now operating independently, warned them to brace for even more attention once the summit aired. "Summit?" Tasha asked. Jordan hesitated. "They invited Silas to speak at the National Education Equity Summit in D.C. "Wait, what?" "They want him to close the weekend. Final keynote. Broadcast nationally." Silas was silent. "Of course they do," he said softly. Tasha looked at him, heart swelling with pride and dread. "They want me to represent what's possible," Silas said, "but only if I follow their rules." The math club was quietly disbanded. No announcements. No emails. Just missing posters from hallway walls. and the whiteboard in room 3C, left blank. Mr. Rowan had resigned quietly. No farewell, no accountability. The club that once saw Silas as an outsider had been dissolved rather than confronted. It was easier to end it than fix it, Mrs. Harmon said when she passed Silas in the hallway. He nodded. That's how they handle everything. Still, Silas returned to the library every Thursday. The tutoring sessions had grown. Now kids from other districts were attending. A few parents even came just to observe. Tasha organized carpools. A local retired engineer volunteered to co-teach geometry. One Saturday, a college student drove in from 2 towns over just to meet him. But Silas could feel it. Eyes watching. Whispers sharpening. The system hadn't forgotten him. It was just waiting to see what kind of story he'd let them write. The day before the summit, a package arrived from Vanguard. Inside, a navy blue blazer, crisp white dress shirt, a gold tie. There was also a letter. We're honored to have you represent the future of STEM. Your story is inspiring, and your voice is powerful. We trust your remarks will reflect the spirit of unity and forward-thinking innovation this summit celebrates. There was a speech enclosed, prepared, polished, safe. Silas read it. Every word was calculated. It praised progress. It mentioned challenges without naming systems. It told his story. Edit. No flash drive, no racial slurs, no suspension. Just a sanitized version of genius that appeared out of nowhere. Never fought back, never spoke too loudly. Tasha stood behind him, reading over his shoulder. That's not your voice, she said. Silas looked at her, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. No, but they'll give me a stage to say it. End. He folded the speech carefully, slid it into his bag. And they might regret that. The summit was held at a glass-walled convention center in Washington, D.C., the main auditorium packed with policymakers, educators, philanthropists, and scholars. The stage was sleek, minimalist design, LED backdrop, the word equity glowing in bold serif font behind the podium. Silas sat backstage, waiting. He could hear the applause after each panel. The speakers before him had covered everything. Test scores, funding gaps, teacher training, curriculum reform. They spoke in statistics and smiles. And then it was his turn. Tasha sat in the front row, heart pounding. Jordan stood near the press section, recording. The teleprompter glowed. Silas walked onto the stage to a standing ovation. He approached the mic, waited for silence. The prompter began. Good afternoon. My name is Silas Merrick, and I am honored to stand here today. He didn't say it. Instead, he looked up and closed the binder in front of him. I won't be using the script, he said calmly. A ripple moved through the audience. The prompter paused. Silas continued. I was told this was a space for truth, so here's mine. He scanned the room. I was suspended from school for solving a math problem too fast. A gasp. I was accused of cheating, then of rebellion, for trying to help other kids succeed. Not because I broke rules, but because I broke expectations. Flashbulbs flickered. Silas didn't blink. I was told I didn't fit. That my excellence was aggressive. That my silence was suspicious. That my leadership was defiance. Tasha felt her chest tighten. Silas's voice didn't shake. I was offered a scholarship on the condition that I stay quiet, that I stop using my voice, that I smile for the cameras, but not for the cause. He paused. I won't. Dead silence. I want an education that doesn't require me to amputate my identity. I want success that doesn't come at the cost of the truth. I want every child, quiet or loud, brilliant or behind, to be believed. He stepped back from the mic. This is not a rebellion. This is a reminder. He turned to leave. The audience sat frozen. And then applause. Not polite, not slow, thunderous. Tasha rose to her feet, eyes full of tears. Jordan's hands trembled as she uploaded the footage live. As Silas walked off stage, a woman approached him backstage, Vanguard's director, her expression unreadable. You just changed everything, she said. He nodded. Good. On the summit stage, Silas looks at the teleprompter and goes off script. Silas stepped off the stage at the summit as the echoes of applause still reverberated in the hall, but his heart felt like it had just opened a wound, raw, exposed, bare. He walked down the corridor backstage, each breath heavy with the weight of what he had done. Truth, unfiltered. He felt the palpable shift in air, the kind that follows when silence breaks. People whispered in small clusters, exchanging glances that held both shock and admiration. In that moment he sensed he had cracked the mirror of what the world thought was acceptable, and the reflection was breaking. Tasha emerged from the crowd and wrapped her arms around him, her hug trembling, her pride undeniable. "You did it," she whispered, her voice cracked but with hope. "You said it." He didn't respond. There was no right word. The world felt changed, but inside him, the change gaped open like a scar resculpting itself. Meanwhile, outside the glass walls of the auditorium, the live stream footage raced across the internet. By midnight, the clip of Silas's unscripted speech had over 5 million views. Comments flooded in, from teachers, students, activists, parents, thousands claiming they were Silas once, that they knew what it felt like to solve and still be silenced. Videos stitched with his lines as voiceover. "I was suspended for solving a math problem too fast," trended on social platforms, shared from classroom to classroom, community to community. For many, Silas became more than a student. He became a symbol. In the following days, messages poured into the Merrick home. Anonymously at first, students from other districts sharing their own stories of being passed over. Parents describing statements made to their children. "You're too quiet. You don't fit our criteria." One single mother from Ohio wrote, "My son stopped raising his hand after 7th grade. I didn't know why, now I do." Another, a teacher from a public school in Texas, sent a letter, "I want to nominate my student, but I'm afraid of getting flagged. Thank you, Silas, for giving me courage." Emotional emails, typed in trembling text, filled their inbox. Stories of erasure, erased brilliance, potential wasted not for lack of intellect, but because of disbelief. Amid this surge, the summit organizers, long a quiet background in education reform, scrambled to control their narrative. They issued a statement that afternoon: "We value equity and applaud Mr. Merrick's courage. We invite all districts present to review their practices." It was a mild attempt to ride the wave they had inadvertently helped start. But the fire was already out of control. And governments don't ride fires, they fight them. Within 48 hours, a prominent civil rights attorney released a call for a federal investigation into several school districts, including Silas's. The attorney's press release cited purposefully the leaked data, the flash drive documents, the internal memos, and the ever-growing testimony from former students. The call stirred national media, talk shows, morning news panels, education podcasts, all asking the same question: how many Silases are out there? At Meadow Ridge Middle, the reaction was chaotic. The principal's office closed down the old equity review page on the district website. Emails from parents flooded in, demanding answers. The gym where the board had met now became a staging ground for community meetings, petitions, and solidarity rallies. One group of parents, holding printed flyers of the flash drive evidence, chanted outside the district headquarters for hours. Another, students from Silas's tutoring sessions, handed out mini booklets titled "When Silence is Not Option." Their slogan: "We solve problems, not ignorance." Teachers, once quiet now, felt compelled to speak or resign. Some offered statements, admitting they had overlooked talent. Others wrote apology letters. A few resigned, their emails citing irreconcilable values. The school district scrambled to respond: emergency meetings, reorganized committees, calls for community healing sessions, and a public promise to overhaul their gifted and honors placement procedures. But for all the noise and change, there was one official act that made it concrete. The U.S. Department of Education announced it was launching an investigation into the district's practices under Title VI, unequal treatment based on race in federally funded schools. Overnight, what had been a local scandal became national. Headlines read, "Federal probe into Mid-Georgia school district after viral racism claims. Could this be the biggest bias scandal in U.S. public education?" Silas watched the coverage from his bedroom, dark except for the glow of his laptop screen and the slight hum of traffic outside. His mother paced downstairs, phone in hand, fielding calls from media, activists, and families seeking guidance. He didn't know whether to feel shame or pride, or both. Maybe that was the new normal, feeling everything at once. He thought about the kids he tutored, some he'd met only a month ago carrying stacks of old notebooks, eyes wide with hope. He thought about the girl who struggled with fractions, the boy who always second-guessed himself before writing a single number, the shy grade schooler who didn't believe he could do algebra. He thought of them, because this wasn't just his story anymore. Late that night, a knock came at their door, soft, urgent. Tasha opened it to find a woman in a dark coat, holding a thick envelope. No introduction, no preamble, just 2 words, from Washington. Inside, the letter bore the seal of the Department of Education. Its contents wasn't public record, yet. But the words she read aloud, quiet, reverent, made her legs buckle. Federal review initiated. Please preserve all records, communications and artifacts related to Meadow Ridge Middle School's academic placement and disciplinary practices. Investigation will commence within 72 hours. Silas and Tasha looked at each other. The room felt cold, small. The weight of history hung heavy in the air. Silas closed his eyes. He could almost hear the slow opening of chains somewhere. The sound barely audible, but real. The sound of accountability coming. In the stillness, he reached out and closed his laptop. Then he stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the dark street. Outside, a lone street lamp flickered. He thought of the tap of marker on a whiteboard, the hush of a classroom, the secret whisper in a teacher's email, the flash drive hidden in a desk, the voices finally rising. He thought of every black student who was counted out, forgotten, undermined, told they didn't fit. And he thought, maybe this is just the beginning. Because a voice that refuses to be silent can change everything. A federal investigation is launched into the school district's practices. 6 months after the federal investigation was announced, the world around Silas Merrick had changed, but not in the neat, scripted way many expected. Instead, it moved in waves, uneven, messy, but real. Tasha's kitchen, once a battlefield of worry and late-night emails, now smelled like warm cinnamon rolls one Saturday morning. A small sign that healing, however fragile, was beginning. Silas started the nonprofit. He named it Bright Horizons Math and STEM Initiative. The name sounded hopeful, and it was intended to be just that. The first meetings were in the library, where he had tutored, now rearranged into makeshift classrooms, a whiteboard at the front with bigger markers, and a sign on the door, "Welcome, future problem solvers." The first Saturday session had 10 kids, young black and brown students from neighborhood schools, middle schoolers and early high schoolers. Eyes wide, backpacks open, notebooks out. Some came shy, heads bowed. Some came defiant, arms crossed. But by the end of the 4-hour session, they all left laughing, explaining equations to each other, scribbling algorithms on their backs, helping each other solve problems. Silas walked among them, not as a teacher at a podium, but as a mentor, a guide. The nonprofit gained momentum quickly. Local volunteer tutors signed up, including college students and retired engineers. Community donors, people who had seen the viral speech, read the articles, joined the protests, began sending small checks. The nonprofit's website launched. Posts flourished, pictures of kids solving math problems, smiles, group hugs after they cracked tough questions, testimonials from parents. One mother wrote, "My son finally believes he can be more than average. Thank you." Meanwhile, in the wake of the scandal, the consequences for administrational complicity had rippled outward. Dr. Harold Layton, the former superintendent of Meadow Ridge District, resigned under public pressure, a move framed as stepping down for the good of the district. His handshake images were replaced with new leadership announcements, and his office was reorganized. He vanished from the public face of the district almost overnight. Mr. Blake Rowan, once the math club teacher who had thrown that condescending challenge at Silas, quietly disappeared from staff directories. No farewell, no statement. It was as though he had simply evaporated. Attempts from reporters to locate him led nowhere. One voicemail, "Not at this number." One email, "Account closed." The same for any forwarded phone numbers. It was a clean erasure. Back in the journalism world, Jordan Clare received a national award for investigative reporting on education equity. The trophy sat in her small home office, but she called it more of a victory for the children than for herself. In the award acceptance speech, she dedicated it to every kid told they're too silent, too quick, too different, too black. Photos of that speech circulated through newswires, often alongside images of Silas tutoring or families at Bright Horizons. Tasha, she became a community leader in her own right. She organized town hall meetings for concerned parents, hosted workshops to help families learn how to advocate for their children, and co-chaired a district-wide equity council that restructured how gifted placement decisions would be made in the future. At home, she still cooked, still folded laundry, but now she did it with a sense of purpose that grounded her exhaustion. One crisp Saturday morning, exactly 6 months after the investigation began, Silas walked up to the old building of Meadowridge Middle School. The bricks looked the same. The windows, the doors, all familiar. The hallways smelled faintly of old books and chalk dust. But inside, something different was happening. He carried a stack of folders, trophies, pencils, graphing calculators, all donated for the event, and a large banner that read, Meadowridge Math Competition, Bright Horizons Edition. The plan was simple: host a community math contest open to any student from the district, but especially encourage participation from Black and Brown students to build confidence, visibility, and community. He walked into room 3C, the same room where everything had started, where he had been challenged, humiliated, ignored, and now he felt a strange peace. The desks had been rearranged, not in neat rows but in clusters. There were posters on the walls, equality posters, math-themed murals, colorful equations. On the whiteboard at the front, written in bright marker, "Solve for tomorrow." Kids began to trickle in, nervous, excited, some with parents, some alone. A few recognized Silas from the news, from social media, from the viral live stream. Some recognized the veteran teachers who had returned, nervous but supportive under new administration. And a handful, Black boys and girls, entered quietly and took seats at the back. Their eyes were wide, their shoulders a little slumped, but the light in them flickered. Hope, maybe. Fear, maybe. But possibility. Silas stood at the front, heart thumping. He gave a soft smile. "Welcome," he said. "This is your space, your chance." The contest began. Calculus puzzles, algebra mazes, logic challenges, some tough enough to stretch older students, some simple to build confidence. Parents sat at the edges, older community members too. The room buzzed with excitement. A boy in the back solved a logic problem in under 2 minutes, and sat still, stunned, waiting to see if anyone noticed. Silas walked over, nodded, winked, and moved on. After 2 hours, the contest ended. Prizes were handed out, calculators for the winners, math kits for all participants, and most importantly, certificates that said, Bright Horizons Contestant 2025. When the final bell rang and the students filed out, there was laughter, pride, cameras flashing, parents' phones, reporters from local papers, smiling kids holding up their certificates. The atmosphere felt electric. It felt alive. Silas packed up his things slowly. Tasha helped carry the supplies. As they exited the building, they paused at the front door. He looked back at room 3. Something in him shifted, a calm satisfaction, but also a softness. Because this wasn't just an event, it was reclamation. He turned to walk away. But then he paused. At the back row of the classroom, where he had challenged the system, a silent figure remained seated. A black boy, maybe 14, slightly slouched, clutching a half-filled test sheet. He looked up as Silas made eye contact. Their eyes met. The boy didn't stand. He didn't approach, but he nodded. Just once. Quiet, recognizing. Silas nodded back. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them. A spark, fragile but alive. Tasha saw it, and her lips curved softly. "Looks like the work's just beginning." Silas didn't speak. He didn't have to. He just stepped into the hallway, the hall of his past, and walked forward. Because the future they tried to stop wasn't a distant dream anymore. It was starting. As he turns to leave the room, a new black student sits in the back. Silas nods. A new spark has begun. No child should be punished for being brilliant. No voice should be silenced for speaking truth. If Silas's story moved you, if it made you angry, made you hope, then don't scroll past. Type yes if you believe in justice. Subscribe if this broke your heart.